Thanks for listening to this Voice of San Diego podcast bonus episode. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and Editor-in-Chief at Voice of San Diego. We've got another big week here. In the podcast feed, we have a pair of episodes dropping right now dedicated to the county supervisor race, and this one is District 2. That's a district that covers a huge swath of eastern San Diego County and even a little section of the city of San Diego. It's currently represented by Supervisor Dianne Jacob, who's terming out. She supports Steve Vaus. Steve Vaus declined our request to come in for an interview. This is my interview with Joel Anderson. He's a Republican. He got the Republican endorsement for this seat. He's a former state senator, and now he's running to replace Jacob. Also running in District 2 is Kenya Taylor, a Democrat, and her interview with Voice Assistant Editor Andrew Keats is also in your feed. But for now, here's my chat with Joel Anderson. Former State Senator Joel Anderson, welcome to the podcast studio.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming in. All right, we have a lot to talk about, but first I had a few questions just to get to know you a little bit better. Where do you actually live?
Alpine.
Alpine. Okay.
Been there for over 30 years.
And
raised my kids there, and it's a great place to live.
Have you had any trouble getting fire insurance renewed?
So I haven't, but others have. And, of course, you know, our insurance commissioner, Laura, has put a mandate on it, moratorium is what I meant to say. And so people should have a better chance now than before. But we have a real problem that needs to be addressed. And, you know, Ricardo and I served in the Senate together, so I called him earlier, about a year and a half ago, and I said, Ricardo, you may not realize living in L.A. how this is going to impact the rural areas. And so I know that he's searching for an answer. It's a difficult situation. Mm-hmm. Part of the problem is that we have to be more serious about fire protection. I mean, that's really where it comes down to. Insurance companies are just looking at the cost and return on investment. They're not actually thinking about how to play a stronger role in fire protection. And I think that's one area where the county could be more helpful.
I find this to be a really interesting question. It's because this does feel like the market actually responding to a situation, saying like maybe we shouldn't live in places like that. Do you feel like it's sending a signal like that?
Well, I think that's how we got in this horrible predicament. A lot of people have that view. Fires don't know borders.
Right.
And what, you know, after we had the Witch Creek fire, and after I got into San Diego proper, there was some blowback that somehow we started the fire in East County, that somehow we're responsible. We're the canary in the coal mine. If it wasn't for us, the fire would have been worse had we not intervened initially. And we need more resources to curb it quickly. Plus, we need to have better fire management. You know, when they allow trees that go down to just sit there and not be cleared out, you're asking for a big fire, because we know every year we're going to have a very dry spell, and we know every year that lightning strikes, and there are acts of God that start these fires. They're not all human started. And when I was in the legislature, I actually wrote a letter to Governor Schwarzenegger asking that they deploy all the tankers to Ramona sooner, knowing that the season was drier earlier in the year. It shouldn't be based on the calendar. It should be based on need with the dryness in the air. So there's a lot more that we can be doing, but most people just want quick answers, and that's never... I wish everything was a quick answer, but it's never that way.
Yeah, on both sides, really, too, right? And one of the reasons I imagine you like living out there, though, is the interface with the environment, with the natural habitat, right?
Oh, listen, I love everything about it. The people are just terrific. At night, you can see the stars. It's just a great community. We went out there with the intention of rolling a house like every other Californian in building equity. But my wife was pregnant, and we raised our kids out there, and it was a great community. And there's a lot of community spirit. But, you know, if you go to East County, whether you're in Ramona or Pine Valley or El Cajon or Santee, these are all communities where they take great pride in knowing their neighbor. And that's why East County is a great place to live.
Mm-hmm. You have how many kids?
I have 3.
All grown?
All grown. I'm an empty nester, yeah.
Yeah. Must be something to watch your kids walk around as humans and just be...
Well, there's two really important things. One is they don't live on my couch.
Uh-huh.
That's probably the most important.
Congrats.
And the second, that they're successfully moving along in life, doing the things that they want to do. My oldest daughter is married to a pilot. She was in the Air Force. She just separated from the Air Force, and they live in Del Rio. My second oldest is a nurse. She works at Scripps. She just moved back to San Diego. And then my son enlisted in the Navy, so he just reported to South Carolina for his first stop. He's in atomic, staying to be a nuke in nuke school. So
my wife did nuke school in South Carolina too. We were there. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you have some. When we go out to visit him, we're going to need to know where to go eat.
Is he in North Charleston or Goose Creek or area?
Goose Creek.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's. I mean, it's very suburban out there. But Charleston is an incredible city. So
well, I have not been there, so I'm eager to take my son there and have him show me around.
We used to run through. Used to be a ton of swamps right around there, and I would let the dog run around before I realized that there were so many alligators. Anyway, it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. All right, so you've been a state senator.
Mm-hmm.
You ran for Board of Equalization, now county supervisor, the county supervisor district. You actually handed out a document to me now saying people don't understand the district. What do they most get wrong?
Well, 40% of the district is unincorporated.
Yeah.
And then
I would have thought it would be higher, but okay, interesting. Yeah.
And then 14% is city of San Diego.
Okay.
And then all the rest are neighboring cities. So a lot of folks, though, think that one city or another city are dominant in the area, and it's not really true. 40 is unincorporated, 40%.
And you wanted to run for county supervisor. Why?
Well, I spent 30 years in East County.
Mm-hmm.
Actually longer than that, but 30 years in this house. And I just see everything that's wrong in Sacramento is coming to our hometown. Homelessness is out of control. When we think in terms of our roads, I get that people want more bike lanes. I get that they want to push the trolley. But nobody in East County, nobody in the rural portions of the district are riding their bike to Costco for 48 rolls of toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's taking the trolley to hit their medical appointments or an emergency room. And I think that we really need to fight for those folks to have access to health care, especially seniors, that our emergency vehicles are on roads that they can arrive there before it's too late. And I think the focus is too much on taking roads and making them bike lanes when we really should be adding additional bike lanes, but not stealing lanes for cars and emergency vehicles.
Is that really a challenge that East County's facing?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, as far as like roads being taken away?
Well, not only the roads taken away, but the condition of the roads. I mean, potholes, it's just a disaster. And there are things that we can be doing that are smart to fix it. For example, at Gillespie Airfield, there are 70 acres that are undeveloped. Right now, there are 3,000 jobs, $20 million in taxes generated by the airport. If we were to develop that land with jobs and opportunity, we would be able to take cars off the 52, off the 67, because people will be working locally. And when I look at that, I think, hey, that's a great idea. It allows people to return home in time to see their kids play soccer and return home to be a bigger part of their kids' lives. And those are all good things. So I don't understand why there's been such a roadblock in developing those 70 acres. Years ago, I got money for Caltrans to fix the Bradley exit, and yet the county chose not to do that. I always like to joke in the district that 51 years ago, we sent a man to the moon with a slide ruler. Today, we have high-speed computers and no political background to fix anything in our lives. Mm-hmm. Almost every area we look, it's worse, not better. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, so one of the things, as you describe that, is that Gillespie area, is that unincorporated, and is it planned for development in the general plan, or is it something that would have to be amended?
There are plans in place, but you have three communities. You have CNT, so CNT has to be part of it at the table. You have El Cajon, which is part of it, and Lakeside. And that's where the rub is. The county portion has not been forthcoming as far as developing the plan and moving forward with it. I've talked to both El Cajon and CNT. They love the idea. Anything that gets cars off the freeways. And look, we're trying to expand the freeway. We're trying to improve it. But we should be doing everything and not just be narrowly looking at that, but looking at how we can develop more jobs in East County so people can stay local.
Mm-hmm. I think what worries me about those discussions about adding those kinds of new developments and such is when you look at a place like the Inland Empire, just north of your district, and Riverside and those areas, that's a type of area that's just been completely developed all the way from border to border of the county. It feels like there's some areas of Temecula and stuff that are still open space, and you don't see any cars have been taken off or anything. The traffic there is horrific, and so I wonder, like, what could we reasonably hope would be an ideal balance between the development and the traffic? It's because I've never seen anything reduce traffic except for a recession, it seems like. So
are you thinking that if we had fewer jobs, less people would be on the roads? I mean, is that the goal?
That's literally the only thing I've heard of that gets rid. I'm not saying we ideally want that. I'm saying I've never seen anything lower traffic.
That would certainly work, and if everybody moved from California, it'd probably be even better if that's the goal, but that's not my goal.
Okay.
My goal is to get people to have a shorter commute. And when you think in terms of El Cajon, there's not a lot of land more to develop. Right. When you think in terms of Santee, it's pretty much very little room to grow. What we're talking about is the people that are employed right now at UTC may not have to drive down the 52 to UTC. They might be able to drive down Prospect to their job.
Right.
And, when you, as a legislator, you get a different view because there's a lot of pluses of being a legislator. For example, I've met with a lot of CEOs over the years in the UTC area, whether it was clean tech or biotech. A lot of their employees come from East County. I think that if we reached out to them with a solid plan, that they might be looking at satellite offices that are secure where people could report their work and maybe commute once a week to the home office for a meeting. My daughter works for USAA, and she commutes from home. And a couple times a month, she has to drive up to San Antonio, which is a couple hours away from where she lives, and report for a meeting. But by and large, she's able to do everything from her home. If we're able to get those satellite offices, because they'll want a secure location, that would be a good thing. And I think jobs and opportunity solve so much of the needs of the community. If we have more jobs, we have fewer people who need government support. Mm-hmm. And that means we have more money for parks and recreation.
Yeah. Let's stay on this theme about development. So there's two major ballot initiatives that directly affect your district that you're interested in representing. There's Measure A and Measure B.
Right.
Measure A in particular, that would say that if you want to build something that's outside the current general plan for what's allowed to be built in the various zones around the unincorporated county, then you would put your project forward, and you'd have to get a vote of the entire county to approve that. That's Measure A. And then Measure B is one of those particular developments that was approved by the county to make a change to that general plan, but then has been forced to a referendum. And I would imagine you're for the B and against A, correct?
So A, I have difficulties with both, but they all stem from A. The idea that coastal people can force upon us all the developments that they don't like is wrong. And I don't like B in the sense that I don't think I should have a say what happens in somebody else's backyard. If B was limited to the communities that touch that area, that would make more sense to me. But I hate this notion that somebody who doesn't live in my community has a voice to dictate what I need and what I don't need. And, in Sacramento, people pass stuff without really truly understanding the ripple effect. And then we're always shocked when it turns out not the way we anticipated. And if you give equal say to people who don't live there, then if I was a nefarious developer, I would have the ability to go out and pick a horrible project and say, I'm going to put it in this community, and aren't you glad it's not in your community? And get people who don't live in my community to force stuff down my throat. I think if it's my neighbor, I should have the greatest say on that project. And what I reject about the Newland project is I live in Alpine. It does not impact me one iota whatsoever. Should I really have as much say to force a community to accept that project or deny that community to accept that project if they were counting on it? And, I see the ads and they say, well, there's only $1 million homes. That's true because it's very hard to build anything shy of $1 million home with the cost of government. And you've seen the reports too, I know, because I've heard you speak of it. When you have communities that 40% of the cost is government added, and people say, well, it's not the permit fees, it's the process of going through the permit. I've talked to different folks, and it doesn't matter if they're putting a granny flat in their backyard or anything else. When you are slow-rolled, where the planning department says you need to put a stop sign in, you do it, you come back to them, and then they say, oh, now we need a light, and oh, now we need this. If they gave it all to you at one time, then you could start construction sooner instead of taking 2, 4, 6 years to build that project. All that time costs time and money. And are we serious about the home issue? I mean, are we really serious? Because it doesn't show it. Everyone is pandering and no one's paying attention to actually making attainable homes that most Californians or San Diegans can live in.
Yeah, I would say no, we're not. See, I would say the vast majority of people who have a home in San Diego are fine with it and relatively hostile to other development. They're saying, like, we made it, we got our place.
Right.
The people, and there's a few like woke folks that say we need to get some other development done nearby or something. But it seems like the vast majority of people that get their lot, they're good, and we should preserve open spaces after that.
So I've gotten a lot of grief in the district because one of my opponents is saying, oh, Joel supported horrible legislation in Sacramento. Look, these are tough choices, and they require real leadership. I co-authored a bill with Scott Wiener from San Francisco, and it was SB 35. And SB 35 said that if you had high density, low income, and you're willing, it was an opt-in program. The developer didn't have to do it, but if they chose to, and they opted in, building that within a half a mile of a trolley station, the planning department would have 60 days to approve the plan. They can make any changes they want, but after 60 days, they had to move forward if it was under 150 units, 90 days if it was more than 150 units. And they said, well, I was taking local control away. Well, it only applied to communities that didn't meet their housing needs. They are required to build a certain amount. We've all agreed on General Plan 2020, and yet we have failed each and every year to meet that need. When I'm 60 this year, I'm talking to my friends. All their grandkids are in Phoenix. I don't want to have to visit my grandkids in Phoenix. There's no reason why our kids don't have the same opportunities that we had growing up and graduating from high school locally. And yet we're doing everything we can to stop jobs at Gillespie Field. We're doing everything we can not to build any of the homes that are necessary for entry-level housing for people to get into it, and there's no homes to move up to. On every level, we failed, but we sent a man to the moon with a slide ruler. So what's the problem? I think the problem is that most politicians are afraid to do what they know to be right, that it's so much easier to be a naysayer and be against everything, because then you've never offended anyone, right, than it is to show vision and move forward. I'm a conservative Republican. I make no bones about it. Everyone knows it. And I had the most conservative vote in the legislature. I did 453 bills with Democrats. And I did a lot of bills with Scott Wiener. I did a lot of bills with Mark Leno, his predecessor, Nancy Skinner, Lonnie Hancock, Lorena Gonzalez. You know what? That takes leadership. And either we're in the business of solving problems or we aren't. Now, did I vote against their bills? Yeah, probably 80% of the time. But that 20% that we agreed on, I worked with them across party lines. And I'll just tell you this real fast. You couldn't get to the right of me on the Senate floor as a Republican. and you couldn't get to the left of Scott Wiener or Nancy Skinner as a Democrat. So when we had a meeting of the minds, I called it my bookend strategy. Everybody between us had to vote for it because the two extremes agreed.
Yeah.
And I saw it as my job to look for that and not be wait for it to come to me, but actually be proactive. And if you ask most of the Democrats who their favorite Republican was, I think you'd be shocked to learn it's me.
I wouldn't be, but I think we followed that for a while. Yeah, I agree. Let me make sure I understand your point on those two particular issues, because I think it could be actually listened to. People could take their own lesson from what they could hear what they want to hear from what you said about Measure A and Measure B. Let's do Measure A. Measure A would restrict that development unless people voted. I think you made an argument against what we'd call ballot box planning.
Right. Yes.
But you also made an argument against what was essentially people, allowing this development to occur and not taking it on their own. Like you could almost read your argument as saying, like, maybe we should restrict some of this development in the backcountry because Ocean Beach and other places should take more development on their own. So I guess what I'm asking is, are you against Measure A?
I am against it,
right?
But I don't want other communities deciding what's best in my backyard. See, we're thinking that project's going to be a good project. I'm thinking that project could be good or it could be bad, but I should have a weighted say. I should be my area of where I represent should be able to make those own decisions for themselves.
Okay.
When you ask people out of the way, now, if you look at our state bonds, almost every state bond that's passed, San Diego's responsible for 18% of the revenue or higher of paying the bond down. We're lucky if we ever get 8% back to this community. Most of that money is transferred to Los Angeles or San Francisco. It's the same argument. If it's in our backyard, we should have the most say. If it's our money, we should get an equal return on that investment.
Okay, and then on Measure B, the anti-ballot box planning position is actually to be for Measure B, because Measure B, Newland Sierra, was an approved project that it was thrown to a referendum by an initiative. So I couldn't quite say what.
Well, what I was saying is I shouldn't be voting on it.
You shouldn't be, but you have to.
Right, so I would support it. Okay. If the community supported it, if it's approved, I'm not going to second guess what that wants. I'm going to honor what the community wants. Since they approved it, I presume they want it. So I just don't like the idea that downtown gets to dictate to every corner of the county. We're capable. We know what's necessary in our community, and we should be the one that makes that say.
Got it.
That decision.
All right. Let me ask you about Dianne Jacob. She's been there 28 years. She's been kind of an interesting person on different issues. She took a strident opposition position to SDG&E. There's been a few others I want to ask you about power. But what is the origin of the tension and rivalry between you two? That it seems to be one of the more fierce of the beefs in town. Where did that come from, in your opinion?
I have no clue. You know what? I voted for Dianne. I have no idea. The only thing I know is I've had people come up in the district and say, thank God you came along because I'm no longer the most hated in East County. So clearly I have no clue. I don't hate her. What I want is I want to put our constituents first. I want to deliver for my community. That's why, as a hardcore conservative, I did so many bills with Democrats. At the end of the day, this is about serving the people. And, every year I had an open house. We'd have over 5,000 people show up to my open house at the dealership. I had 8 coffees a year where people would show up, anywhere from 75 people in Pine Valley to 750 people in Escondido. I think that as an elected official, we have to be accountable to the people, and they're all our boss. And I remember one year we had 6 protest groups say that they're going to show up on their websites to one of my events to protest me. And I didn't know it, but the sergeants in the Senate track that. And so all of a sudden I had all these sergeants, and they came and they said, we're here to help you. Do you want us to check IDs? Do you want us? I said, no, They're all my boss. I said, they can get in my face. They can say anything they want. I serve them. When they draw blood, then you intervene. But I said, nobody's going to draw blood. We believe in free speech in East County, and we support it. And 6 of the leaders waited afterwards to tell me they disagree with me, but shook my hand and said they appreciated my openness. I cannot represent people unless I understand what is it that they want, need. We're not all going to agree at all times. I don't agree with my wife. She certainly doesn't agree with me all the time. But the more knowledge you have, the better representation you have. And, I've never been a person that if you came up with a better argument, that I was so locked in my own argument that I wouldn't do what I thought was a better idea.
Mm-hmm. One of the ideas that Dianne Jacob ended up finally being able to execute was this change of how we purchase our power, our electricity. So there was obviously SDG&E has provided both the electricity and the delivery of it for a long time now. And both the city and the county in separate ways are going to pursue purchasing that power in a different way from their own agencies. She led that along with Nathan Fletcher. Is that a decision you agree with?
I don't know. I wasn't privy to all the arguments. If the cost of power goes down, I absolutely agree with it. Mm-hmm. If the cost of power goes up, then I'm totally against it. So, like the old whiskey
I think
speech.
That's refreshing. Thank you.
So, look, we should be trying new things. We should be open-minded. But I think change for the sake of change is not necessarily good. And I know that in the legislature, Gray Davis thought he was going to help the state, and it turns out he increased the cost of electricity dramatically. I think that we have to really sit down and think about what are the cause and effect of all this stuff, and we need to start getting serious about it. We need to look at how we treat fires. I mean, I'll give you a good example. I was working with Governor Brown, and sadly his chief of staff passed away, and my bill died when it went. But I came up with, I proposed this idea that when any utility gets fined, 10% of the money would stay in the community. Right now, if SDG&E pays a fine, it goes to the general fund. We never see a dime of it. So $38 million in the last fine went to the state.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If $3.8 million would have stayed here, we could have used that in grants to help clear people on fixed incomes, clear their property so that it wouldn't be such a fire hazard. We could have closed the eaves in their homes. It's a couple grand to close people's eaves, but we could have had people go out and do it. When you have a fire truck, what works downtown does not work rurally, but there's no money for rural fire trucks. We could have purchased fire trucks to be better prepared for the next fire. The governor loved the idea, and he put his chief of staff. I was in the super minority. It's not like this is the tail that's going to wag the dog. Mm-hmm. But working with the gravitas from the governor's office, we were moving forward with the bill, and then unfortunately she passed away unexpectedly, and I wasn't able to complete the bill. But these are the out-of-box ways of approaching things that make sense, that serve the community better. Now, the 10% was, I would have liked to have 100% stay locally, but you have to work within the confines of the legislature. But that was a very, very difficult bill, and as a supervisor, I'm going to pursue that again. And I think that Nathan Fletcher is going to love the idea, and I think the two of us with our legislative backgrounds will have the ability, because we understand how Sacramento works. People say, well, you're in Sacramento. What do you know about local government? Well, I voted on local government a lot. And we're never, I don't believe, ever going to get more money from Sacramento in our general fund. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. However, we can put pilot programs together and offer solutions. And I know for a fact, because I joint authored a bunch of those, one with Jim Bell for $200 million for mental health. We can do pilot programs, draw more of that money back, and come up with the solutions that we believe are going to solve it for the state. Certainly homelessness is at the top of that list.
What else do you think you could work with Nathan Fletcher on? He's the Democrat on the county board.
Nathan and I were in caucus together when he was a Republican, so I know him quite well. And, I worked with his wife in Sacramento, And I think that we may disagree on how to get there on issues, but for most part, I think we're going to agree on most issues. It's about improving the quality of life for not only us, but our neighbors. And what he did on mental health is absolutely correct, and I would have done that first thing, but I will be a great wingman with him on pushing. We have 100 beds. They're dedicated for mental health and 3.5 million people in this county. It's outrageous. Law enforcement picks somebody up who somebody's reported as having a mental break. They show up, and all the beds are taken up. Then they have to drop the person off in an emergency room. They're not prepared for this. If we truly want to address homelessness, we have to triage mental health out of it. And we don't have the resources to do it right now, but that doesn't mean we can't get it.
Not only are the ERs not prepared for it, but it causes more trauma for the people who, when they go through them.
I agree completely. So I think Nathan's been spot on that. As far as the bicycle lanes, I think he's dead wrong. But he lives in an area where you could take the trolley, you could ride the bike. He's not living in an area where you're rural and you're not going to ride 6 hours to get to a doctor's appointment.
Right.
And you certainly can't carry 48 rolls of toilet paper on the back of your bike.
No. Well,
Costco. A lot of us shop at Costco.
I do too. Yeah. I get there once a month. All right. Let me ask you about your opponent, Steve Vaus. So he's the mayor of Poway. There was a really interesting problem in Poway with regard to their water, and I saw you've always been pretty savvy with politics. A lot of your supporters got together in the water world. They're represented districts and other places. They held a press conference and really hammered him for his lack of, or his management of the situation. Did you put that together?
I didn't.
Okay.
But in his defense were all his supporters. I love that's a one-edged sword. Nobody went to his website to see that everybody that spoke up in his defense were on his endorsement list.
Yeah.
Look, the people that came out to rally to say it's okay to tell people to drink the water when you're under a boil order, they were all his supporters. But they did that because they like him and they think he has the right judgment for the seat. I get that. The people that support me have witnessed what I've done over the last 16 years in office, and they believe that they chose me over him because of decisions like that. And his supporters chose him over me because of my record. So, look, that's the nature of running for office. The other thing is everybody gets accused of everything all the time.
Yeah.
So I have a great track record. We were very transparent. Almost 2,000 kids went through my internship. We were rated as the number one internship by the UC system, and I got an award for it. I received 27 Legislator Year Awards, and why that's important is because they only give one award per year. So that means 39 of my colleagues didn't receive the award when I got it. And I'm proud of that record. I was in the super minority in the minority party, yet I got Legislator Year Awards. And they don't give it for voting right. They give it to you for making a change. And I'll give you a good example. President Obama signed H.R. 32 into law, which said any state that didn't offer in-state tuition to GI beneficiaries, they would no longer pay out-of-state fees. So effectively, our GIs would lose their benefits. We had 78,000 GI beneficiaries in our colleges and universities. Rocky Chavez introduced a bill, AB 13, blew through the assembly. Everyone voted for it. It was the right thing to do. We were only one of 3 states that didn't offer in-state tuition to these folks. Got to the Senate side, and the chair of appropriations decided to hold it in committee, and it's at his leisure that they're allowed to vote on it. He never allowed to vote, and they killed the committee, and 78,000 of our veterans will have lost their benefits. Look, when I heard about it, I couldn't let that stand. So I went ahead and I amended 20 Democrat bills with the language. And then I got up on the Senate floor and explained what the issue was. And they initially tabled it, and then a couple hours later, the bill came up. Another bill came up, and I went through the amendment again. And I said, look, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But we're a couple months from the elections. Just own it. Be loud and proud. I am. And long story short, the pro tem resurrected the bill, and it got passed out. And I received 7 Legislator of the Year awards from the various veterans organizations up and down the state. Here I am in the super minority, yet I was able to bring attention to doing what was right, and we saved those veterans. Where's that leadership outside of Nathan Fletcher? I mean, whether you agree with Nathan or not, it took him about 5 days to take control of that board. And for the most part, he's done a lot of good things. I want to add balance to that board, and I want to enhance the areas like mental health where we can work together. And I want to improve the quality of our life here in San Diego County, as I did in the state.
So Steve Vaus has been the chairman of the San Diego Association of Governments, and it's been a really interesting time because while he's the chairman, he also is the chairman during the first year now of the new executive director, who's really stirred things up with a lot of frank talk about the agency's finances and financial projections, but then also a lot of frank talk about big choices they'll have to make. And then this vision he's trying to put together about these transit corridors and transportation corridors. Do you think Voss has managed that situation well?
Well, Steve was on the committee that hired him and approved his salary and benefits. I disagree with Steve. I think that leadership is the wrong way to go. In his compromise, $120 million of our bond that we paid for to build our roads was transferred to the trolley, and that's wrong. And he instead gave us back $90 million of it, but was a net loss to us for environmental studies. I don't want any more environmental studies that has no money behind it to build anything. Those environmental studies go stale, and we'll just have to spend another $90 million a decade from now, just like we did a decade ago. So that's a placebo. It's not solving the problem. It's not answering any of the issues. If you want to steal the money, put it to the vote of the people and make sure that the integrity of the process is maintained. Look, I get over a decade, priorities change. We've seen in California things that we thought were always going to be that way change. And that's okay, but it has to go back to the vote of the people. That's where I disagree. I think we should have gone and put that back to the people and let them decide if this is the direction they want to go. And by the way, when you do that and you're transparent and you're honest with people, they're going to trust you the next time you have a bond that goes out. But I'll be honest with you, I don't think I could ever vote for another bond from Sandag knowing that arbitrarily they'll take my money and spend it any way they like. I should have a say when I vote for something, and I should be consulted before they make that change. So I think that there's a huge difference between us. While I used my seat to leverage good things, I never gave up my values. I never didn't vote in a conservative way. Yes, you could beat me up and say I took local control away, but it was an opt-in for SB 35, and it made sense. Why would we ever want to build in Pine Valley low income when no one has a car and they have no way to get to a job? That's just built-in failure. Yet, when we know that we want to improve in order for the trolley to work, we want to improve the ridership, it makes most sense that people who don't have cars should be living closest so that they can walk there. Look, there's more than one way to solve our problems, and I'm open-minded to figure out what they are. But my core values won't allow me to do a bait and switch on people.
Your reputation of bipartisan collaboration and
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something we've always talked about. It's been very impressive to watch. It was part of the context, though, of why we were particularly shook around here when we heard about this accusation that you dealt with. And I want to reference the Union Tribune. State Senator Joel Anderson was reprimanded by the Senate this week after an investigation found that he probably threatened to, quote, bitch slap a female lobbyist, according to documents released on Tuesday. What do you think the public needs to know about this experience and what you went through and what she went through?
Look, first of all, I should have never used the term. I don't care it was in a bar. I don't care that other people were dropping F-bombs and people were just sharing stories. I should have never done it. And if I could take it back, I'd take it back in a heartbeat. But I've never threatened anybody in my entire life. And, people accuse me of having sharp elbows. If I had threatened somebody, I would have owned up to it. I did own up that I said it. I make no bones about it. I said it. I shouldn't have said it. And it was taken out of context. But it doesn't matter. If I had never said it, it couldn't have been taken out of context. So, I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong, and I wish I could take it back. I worked really hard across party lines. I built great reputation, and in a silly moment of telling a story, I used a term that unwound all of it. And I'm hoping that in East County, that people look at me in my entire package, and I think that it'd be really hard to find me have threatened anyone else ever at any time. It's just not my MO. And Nancy Skinner, who was a liberal from Berkeley, who was the chair of public safety when I was the vice chair, I really enjoyed working with her. When I left the legislature, she's the one that wanted to speak on my behalf and send me off in the midst of all this. I think that the people that worked with me, the people that are around me, realized that I used a term I shouldn't have used, but they know me well enough to know that that's nothing. I would never threaten anybody, because you can't move the ball. Once you threaten somebody, you can never work with them again. That's not my MO. I like to work with everybody. I'm always hopeful, even if I've never worked with you in the past, that there's a future date that we can work together. But there's no excuse for using the term. And I'll just say this. They asked me to repeat it, and I repeated it for them because I didn't think I was offending anybody, and I was wrong. I was really wrong.
When you said it, and then they're like, hey, did you just say that? Say it again, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And so I repeated it.
Okay.
Because I was telling a story, but you know what? That terminology. And, you have to ask yourself, from time to time I swear, and there's really no room for swearing, and I should be a better person.
There was a couple of state issues that I wanted to go over and just get your quick take on, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
So SB 50 has just been moved out of the Senate Appropriations Committee into the Rules Committee, so it had a better chance. That'll be an interesting issue going forward. This is the law that would allow, much like the law you said earlier, that would allow developers a lot easier path to put up 4- or 5-story apartment buildings around transit stops or in major job centers or in areas or combined with areas that have good schools. Now that it's going through some negotiation, I can't quite frankly understand exactly what's going on with it right now as far as tweaks, but that's the heart of the bill. It's by your old colleague, Scott Wiener. And, it's one of these things that's like, yes, he's a liberal, but it also is very, supportive of builders and market-based building. And so I don't know where you would end up on that.
So I think it's easy to say that people are supportive of builders. That's not the case. When you talk to legislators, by and large, they care about the constituents. They see the homelessness and they see the builders as a path to fixing that problem.
Right.
So it's not about picking buddies. It's about serving your community. And I like Scott a lot. He's got a great sense of humor. He's a great person. But he is bound and determined to get homes for people in San Francisco. And he's looking at every venue, and he's taking a serious look. And there are a lot of legislators that go through the motion, and I never understand why people work so hard to get into office to do nothing.
Yeah,
Scott's not one of them. Scott's there's a handful
of
Democrats.
You said that. That's one of the things that drives me nuts. You get into these incredible positions, and you don't do anything with it.
And so Scott was really easy to work with because he's transparent. He's not trying to be fancy and any of this stuff. He has such an issue with NIMBYs. The local electeds won't stand up for anything that they know to be right. So you complain about there's no housing, but when you try to do something with housing, then a handful of people say, oh, no, you can't do it. And then everyone's in gridlock. Let's break the gridlock. And it makes sense. And here's the problem. A lot of these communities are building low income in portions that they have no access to jobs. We are building in failure before we even start. And we also know from ridership that really we're not anywhere close to the ridership we need to be for a break even. So these are common sense moves, and why anybody would be against it is beyond me, other than they're not serious about solving the problem. I don't know all the details. I mean, it's kind of funny because now that I left the legislature, nobody can force me to read a bill. So until it gets passed, I don't really, or unless somebody asks me. So I don't know all the details of this bill. But I'd probably be a guy that'd be very inclined to support it, because I know here locally, my kids don't have access to housing. People's grandkids don't have access to housing. We have all sorts of opportunity for jobs, and yet people don't want to build anything that would lead to jobs. They don't want to fix anything. They just want to go the course, be a naysayer. It reminds me of in the 90s, you had a bunch of Republicans, and their idea of legislation was to vote no on everything. Now we see it. The pendulum has swung, and now you have the Democrat supermajority voting no on everything. We need to be thinking about paths to success for our community. And I think that the reason why over 4,000 people have endorsed me in the district, and if you go to my website, you'll see we list them there, and we're adding more all the time. It's because I'm solution-based, and I don't care who I have to work with. If the job needs to get done, let's get it done.
All right, just a couple more things.
Sure.
The county last year sued the Trump administration for its policy of it used to sort of help people that were asking for asylum to find their way to support systems around the country. And with the influx, they just started letting them off in downtown San Diego or in San Isidro. The county sued them and said that they need to provide better assistance in that situation. Is that a legal action you would have supported?
I don't think so. But I'm it's always easy to second guess when you're not the person there. But, I look at the housing for our veterans. Who's suing for housing for our veterans? I know one person who's voting against veterans projects in their city, but who's out there reaching out for those folks? It's just like we give in-state tuition to people who are here illegally, but we were going to deny in-state tuition to GI beneficiaries who we didn't give it to them. They earned it. That was part of their compensation, and we were denying them that compensation. I just want to play fair. I want to do what's right in our communities, and I want to fight for everybody equally, and that means that we don't have preferential treatment for anyone. Now, if the feds dump on us, then we need to push back. If the state dumps on us as a county, we need to push back. But lawsuits usually just make attorneys rich.
Do you fully support the president?
Yeah, absolutely. I was his chair for California. I make no bones about it. I like jobs. Now, all I've done is talk about jobs. So I love the president and the low unemployment rate. I think that when people are employed, it allows them to take pride in providing for themselves and for their family. And I think that does more to lift people than anything else. And again, do I agree with, or does my wife agree with me 100% of the time? No. And I'm never going to agree with anyone. But when President Obama was elected, I never said he wasn't my president. We're in the same canoe, and we're all paddling. And if that canoe sinks, we all sink. So I want the president to be successful, just like I wanted Obama to be successful, just like I wanted Bush to be successful. And I want to take advantage of the hot market, grow jobs in East County, and allow people to get off the freeway and work local.
Former State Senator Joel Anderson, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this Voice of San Diego podcast episode. You can keep up with all of our political coverage at Politics Report. That's the newsletter Andrew Keats and I do every Saturday. Get that at VOSD.org/newsletters. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and Editor-in-Chief. This show's produced by Nate John, Megan Wood, and Adriana Heldings. It's recorded also in the Voice of San Diego podcast studio. It's the most popular political affairs podcast recorded in downtown San Diego, and it's made possible in this studio which is the Bob Nelson Charitable Fund Studio, sponsored by them this year. Thank you so much, Bob Nelson Charitable Fund. And thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.